Hello, Ben.
Hello, Trevor. I figure just talking about this and recording it couldn't hurt.
Meaning, like, why do certain things jump out at us as opposed to other things, or why is it that we see only some things seem essential and some things don't?
Yeah, that and well, I was just thinking like I mean, our tantric practice is very basically everybody has the same goal in our sangha. Everybody's trying to become fully enlightened. And
Yeah,
it's we're all clear on that. But that's not the case for everybody. Not everybody's trying to do that, and that includes everybody that's reading Course in Miracles. Even though I do think that like for a really serious student that wanted to become a Christ, I do think you could do it with this book. And
I think so. Like, if you had really high merit, you could make it happen.
through this
I
through
still
this book and
having a
just
teacher would save you a lot.
sorry, having a what?
I think having a teacher would save you a lot of time.
uh, yeah, yeah. But I feel like if people can figure out how to do guru yoga, and then they're doing guru yoga with Jesus, and they're doing the book, reading the book. Well, I don't think you even need to do the book lessons then at that point. But just reading the book and doing guru yoga with Jesus, I think you can do it.
Is
But
there something akin to Guru Yoga, like something that would suffice as instructions?
I mean, I think so, but like everything else, it's sort of scattered here and there in the book. Like I know
Yeah.
there's times where I can't think of any quotes, but Jesus says, even just in the first chapter, I know there's something, um, where he says like, the Holy Spirit is close to him, and so he can bring down. I think it's in the section on Revelation. Um,
Revelation, time, and miracles.
yeah, let's see if I can find that really quick. Yeah, yeah. Revelations are indirectly inspired by me. Keeping in mind, revelations are the same as awakenings. Indirectly inspired by me because I am close to the Holy Spirit and alert to the revelation readiness of my brothers. I can thus bring down to them more than they can draw down to themselves. So that's not really telling you how to do guru yoga, but Jesus is saying that he can facilitate awakening.
Yeah, and if you know
Um,
what Guru Yoga is, that's going to stand out immediately. Be like, oh, of course, yeah, you use the master as a bridge to his state.
mhm.
This second
So,
section
but
actually didn't speak a lot to me, but I know the whole section seemed like a way to backdoor anxiety over time. And maybe that is
mm,
especially important for somebody trying to awaken because you get all graspy over how long it's going to take and what life could be like afterwards and whatever. It's like, don't even think about it. Just it's like time doesn't exist if you're looking correctly.
mm. Well, just you saying that reminds me, or makes me think of another part here in the first chapter where basically he explains the whole process of correcting the relative, um, before basically getting to the absolute level. That's sorry, I got distracted by my dog's doing something funny. um, but so there's all these errors that people have made, and different people are fixating on different errors, like thinking time is really important, for example, or having anxiety about time. And The book does do that, right? It's so comprehensive. Like it kind of covers all the different things you can be afraid of or confused about, and just sort of like easing your mind about all of those things. And it would make sense that they're not all going to be equally um, impactful for each person. But that's sort of also its weakness, because depending on your merit, you can just rest in the easy sections and ignore the sections that are actually addressing the error you're making. You could skip that.
Yeah, you can totally read something that feels good and be like, yeah, I got it, and then just coast or like feel good about, your day or something instead of making it hurt again and look at what hurts,
Hmm.
or which is our method anyway.
But I think anybody who's putting any kind of energy into it, even if they are in sort of a stuck pattern where they're like just sticking with something easy that the course says, like, it should still slowly accumulate merit, right? Even if you're just like parroting one of the nice sounding lines.
I think
Like,
so because it keeps
yeah.
turning it back at the reader. Like it keeps forcing you to open up in tiny little ways over and over to get these things to make sense. So I could definitely see like just churning through the material is going to accumulate merit.
Or what if, let's say, for example, like, what if somebody just reads it and thinks like, okay, basically this is just telling me I need to forgive people for what they did, and you go around in the world, and somebody steps on your toe and you say, "Oh, I forgive you." It's like that's not really what the course is talking about, but that still will generate merit.
Yeah. I mean, for some people, that might change who they are. Like, I know people that
Totally.
will not tolerate their toes being stepped on without violence. It just depends.
Yeah, totally. Uh, oh, okay. Here's the All right, let me read this paragraph about the bottom up thing. The idea of orders of need. This is, oh geez, section 6, paragraph 3, and that was Perkins contributing.
Oh, I
The
wrote this
idea
one
of
down too.
or Oh, cool. All right. The idea of orders of need, which follows from the original error that one can be separated from God, requires correction at its own level before the error of perceiving levels at all can be corrected. You cannot behave effectively while you function on different levels. So that's kind of what we're talking about, right? It's like if
Yeah.
you're going around wanting to beat up everyone that steps on your foot, first you got to fix that and forgive them on the level that you're, because you are still, like it says here, you think you live in space where concepts such as up and down are meaningful. So um yeah, correction must be introduced vertically from the bottom up.
It's interesting because it kind of aligns with our path map in a way. Although we go absolute first, like we go straight upwards, the same vertical axis he's talking about. But we end up opening each level and then addressing each level on the relative. Whereas here it sounds like he's saying you want to sort out your relative world first and then see the absolute of that level, which is more like a gradual path.
Well, he's just it's just Hinayana.
Which
This,
part?
because remember, this, we talked about this last time. This has basically, this has all the yanas of Buddhism. It has Hinayana, which is like correcting your behavior.
I don't know if I would sum up Hinayana like that. Because like even from our perspective, like we say the vows, right?
Hmm.
So to me that's behavioral. If you don't have that
Right, right.
direction set you're not going to behave as a bodhisattva would. And a Hinayana
For
guys,
sure.
they take care of themselves. And this thing doesn't really seem like it's a take care of yourself thing. It's like a at least be open to your neighbor sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, I got you. So, but Hinayana is partially correcting your behavior because it is like, you know, ge- well, now I'm thinking generosity is a paramita, which is in Mahayana, but the eightfold path, right? It's like right conduct, right ethics, and then it's like don't harm, don't steal, don't use substances. Um, it's like ethical rules of ethical conduct are part of Hinayana.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it's like it is starting. It seems like that's just all paths have to start from that. Like you have to correct, and it makes sense because like if you're acting harmfully on a regular basis, you're just digging yourself into a deeper and deeper hole, and you're never even gonna get to the Mahayana level if you're beating people up when they step on your feet, you know,
Yeah.
because
I
your
kind of
mind
like
isn't
how A
gonna
Course
be.
in Miracles does that, where they're
Yeah.
like, it's like you're saying, there are Hinayana level teachings where it's like, just, from me to your neighbor, or, you to your neighbor, and you sort out those relationship issues, and you're not really tackling the whole world yet. Although you are like, it does mention repeatedly in different ways that the whole world is your world and it's pointing back at you. But then it gives you like small practical things to look at where I guess it's like we were talking about earlier. It's like a personality thing. Like my
Hmm.
brain works more like Gampopa. It likes a systematic progression. But it's also cool if you're reading through A Course in Miracles and you're like, got this teaching, got that, got that. That's simple. Yeah, love your neighbor. The world isn't real. What? And you're like, it turns you back to look at it then. And then you start the next cycle of like, I get it, I get it, I get it. I don't get this thing. And so you have to digest it.
That's a great point, man. Yeah, totally. I was thinking before you said that, made that great little line there. I was thinking like Course in Miracles kind of puts all the different paths and like throws it in the blender.
Yeah, yeah.
So you just you like yeah, like one line will be one path and then one line will be like just pure absolute truth, so to speak. Um and that is interesting too because you can't I haven't thought about this kind of stuff really. This is interesting. Like so something that happens with Buddhism, right, is especially in this day and age is you can get everything online. You can go to whatever if you're clever, and I didn't say smart, if you're clever, you can find whatever is considered the most advanced teaching, like the very final teachings in Buddhism, and go straight to that and be like, yes, this is for me. This is what I need. And you can just read that shit all day long and it won't do anything because you don't know what it means and you didn't and you skipped. But you can't Course in Miracles doesn't offer that opportunity because it doesn't you there's no way to do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there are sometimes, but it's like, it's part of the rest of the thing. Like, where in Buddhism, if you're going to go straight to the end, like people like you and me do, we want to go, like, for instance, we would fix our trajectory towards Dzogchen and like the fastest means to get there. And then
Hmm.
because those teachers are like competent, they're going to give us some preliminaries and some other things to at least prepare us to even get those highest teachings that we're aiming for. Whereas this, like, of course, in Miracles doesn't necessarily, but it does prime you over and over with like these smaller
Yes.
things. Like it builds you up to receive it, and then it gives you this like big pow non-dual thing, and either you get it or you
Hmm.
don't. And even if you don't get it, you're like, well, it's not supposed to be fathomable, so you like move on. But if you do sit there
Mm.
and contemplate it, you might actually have a breakthrough experience like koan style in Zen.
Dude, you're like selling me on Course in Miracles even more, and I'm the last one that needs to get sold on it.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
because
ironic.
before we hit record, um I was sitting here. I was kind of having some trouble, like thinking, like how. um, the problem is I'm thinking too concretely. Like person X is at this spot, and they need this. How do I like? How is Jesus intending for this person to get what they need specifically out of this book? But it doesn't really work like that, does it? It works like how you just described, where it's kind of all in there. It's like a spiritual multivitamin, right? You just take it once a day.
Yeah, you just like jam all the information in there, and it like churns around, and every now and then it might like make the connection you need. It may not even be when you're reading it. Maybe later on when somebody steps on your toe.
Totally. That reminds me. Um, I think it was Lama Carl just reposted a blog from Baba. This is a little bit of a tangent, but um, people. Well, it's relevant because we want to talk about Revelation and sort of focus on that eventually. Um, but he was talking about how people that are doing the two-part formula and trying to wake up will get really focused on having that experience in their meditation, and like, and I know I've had this experience too, where like before I really knew was familiar with how awakenings work for me personally. Anytime any kind of like experience would start to happen in a meditation, I'd be like, here we go, getting ready for awakening. But for me, for almost all of my awakenings have happened at night while I was sleeping and not in meditate. Not a single one has happened in meditation. So
Oh, that's wild.
yeah.
That thing Lama Carl posted, or Amrita Simha as we know him now. Um, I remember that cycle in the 2PF when I was doing it. Like right before it popped, I was there was like there was a phase of grief where it was like
Mm.
I knew I'm not here. Like I know that I'm just an idea. And I kept looking at it and there was just this layer of grief knowing that it isn't real, but I don't fucking know that yet. Like I knew that's what I was supposed to be getting to. Like so there is something I'm trying to get and that thing is a joke. Like it's not real. And I grieved over that. And then when that grief period ended, everything was fine, like it was always going to be fine because there isn't anything to grasp after. But you have to like force yourself to feel the pain of not grasping after this thing that's more important than everything else, at least at the moment. But yeah, I could totally
Nice.
remember doing that. And I remembered it when he posted that. I was like, yeah, I did grieve over that. And at the time, I didn't even understand why there was grief there. I just thought that was part of the formula, which it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually thought more out of Revelation, Time, and Miracles would stand out to me, but I ended up only writing down paragraph 6.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and read that one because it's
Yeah, yeah,
kind of
go for
meaty.
it.
The miracle minimizes the need for time. In the longitudinal or horizontal plane, the recognition of the equality of the members of the sonship appears to involve almost endless time. However, the miracle entails a sudden shift from horizontal to vertical perception. This introduces an interval from which the giver and receiver both emerge farther along in time than they would otherwise have been. The miracle thus has the unique property of abolishing time to the extent that it renders the interval of time it spans unnecessary. There is no relationship between the time a miracle takes and the time it covers. The miracle substitutes for learning that might have taken thousands of years. It does so by the underlying recognition of perfect equality of giver and receiver on which the miracle rests. The miracle shortens time by collapsing it, thus eliminating certain intervals within it. It does this, however, within the larger temporal sequence.
Mm.
Does that not sound like a release of karma to you?
Oh,
Because that's what
absolutely.
it sounds like to me.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, it's just like that insight we talked about before, where I was like looking at being awake and then looking at in the context of the whole like continuum of lives or whatever,
Hmm. Hmm.
knowing it had been several lives since the last time this awakening experience, or at least recognizing awakeness had even happened. That's what this says to me. Like whenever it happens, you sandwich all those possible lives that you could have spent relearning the same lesson, and now you've avoided however much time it takes to learn it because you have what they're calling revelation, but we know it as just awakening.
Hmm. What I keep thinking of, I I always like the physical spatial metaphors, and the with the horizontal and the vertical, and so you have like a graph, right? And the world is horizontal, and awakening, it's like, and it's also interesting because you I like to think about like, well, density, like the atmosphere gets lighter and lighter as you go further up, and then there's also like the energy to reach escape velocity. Like you need to have a certain amount of a momentum to get to. I'm like mixing all these metaphors together to get
It's
into
all legit
orbit.
though.
Yeah.
That's where the boomies are. They're up. Like you have to feel upwards to connect with the blessings.
So, and also like once you break out of orbit and in atmosphere, you're in pure space, right? And there's no more. Well, there's gravity, but you're like weightless.
Yeah.
The other thing I like to think about is now please keep in mind I failed math. I like don't know shit about math, but I remember the asymptotes, right? And like when you're doing what is it, like algebra, you can never reach the vertical line. Like it keeps curving upwards and upwards, but it's like uh in the sense it's the same because like basically you have to leave the physical world behind to actually reach the the vertical axis, to actually hit the zero,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like your mass has to be zero to hit the zero. And the thing is, you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't do that. Like in this terminology, like God does that. So basically, you just get as close as you can get and let go, and God it plucks you.
Yeah. You ride your equation towards infinity or towards x equals whatever, and you get as close as possible. But the equations are always to infinity, right? Like you are infinitely approaching that limit,
Hmm.
and you have to surrender. If we're going to make that into a meat space metaphor, like you get as close as possible, and then you
Yeah,
surrender that last little bit because you're never going to get there with just the body.
totally. And then you make like a quantum jump, basically, except it's not you doing it. So this is something that um, I wrote a really long post that I posted on some course groups, and I think that I need to learn the algorithm because I think it's too if it's too long, like they don't like it. But anyways, um, I was sort of trying to talk about like, all right, so we have people, and this probably describes like a decent number of people that are course students that have been studying it for a while and probably really want to. Well, they really want to wake up. They want a revelation. We know that there's people like this in Buddhism for sure. People that have just been wanting to wake up for decades, even. And so they're like, the readiness is there. They just don't have the technique. Um, well, it's tricky because we do have the technique, but I guess the question is like, um, what else can people do? This is such a dumb question. because we know the answer is to do the 2-part formula, but
Yeah.
there's people that are just skimming along this line, kind of like it's like they want it, but they just don't quite want it just enough. What do you look at? What I suggested was like, um, well, you were talking about your grief, and I was saying like look at the uncomfortable, like look at whatever hurts just as closely as possible. Like look at don't look at love and light, right? But like just like try to find that feeling of like emptiness and lack that you're kind of living with, and
Yeah.
just feel how big
Or
that is.
look at what's driving you towards spirituality. Is it really a love of these materials, or is it like a dissatisfaction with your current state and knowing that if you study certain things, supposedly it's supposed to get better, or or do you have a fear of what happens if you don't study these things? Like you feel like you should because they feel whole and meaningful, but also the rest of the world doesn't really acknowledge it, and like you know what real life is and it's not necessarily these things. However, that fear or dissatisfaction is not going anywhere. I know you sort of attributed readiness to an example that I don't think I would give readiness to. Like if you're sort of on the edge of wanting to awaken, or you're like curious but you never really take it up, I would say you're lacking readiness.
Yeah,
You,
yeah.
you're probably just a little too comfortable, or maybe you're just not, yeah, you're just not quite uncomfortable enough to really start looking for answers. You kind of want to know what's out there. You kind of want to know things in general. You want to be educated, but you don't have the fire underneath you to start changing anything.
Mm-hmm.
Like a new friend of ours, she
Yeah.
is very ready, and she's just looking for something that works. Like that's perfect readiness. She just wants the thing that works and start solving problems. She's not looking to learn stuff or like contribute more data to her knowledge base. She literally just wants stuff to work in a practical way. That's the kind of readiness we're looking for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess even right now I'm like trying to solve a problem that's not a real problem, because I think that readiness, especially if the 2-part formula didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to say this. But with the 2-part formula, it's like readiness comes along with the teachings that you need. Um, so I don't know that anyone really can be stuck and like not getting what they need if they're studying the course.
I think I know what you're saying, and that they're only going to receive what they're ready to receive.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, well, and I'm like, in a sense, I'm like, my question is, I'm trying to ask how people can advance beyond their readiness,
They have to
right? Like if you're
accumulate
not
merit.
quite, yeah, yeah. Well, the workbook lessons, which I don't know when we're going to talk about that someday, but I really like especially the first. So in this long post I was writing, I suggested that people focus on like if they feel like they still um, are needing to try to figure stuff out, to read the first handful of workbook lessons, because they're just impossible to figure out. Um, Let me see if I can find the very first lessons. But the point is like that they would easily be frustrating, and Like lesson 10 is my thoughts do not mean anything. Like you're never going to get that. The more
Yeah.
you think about that, it's almost like I almost feel like my job as like as somebody that really like I want people to wake up, you know, I want people to be able to experience awakening and feel better. Like that's my wish. And if people aren't ready for it, it's like you just need to make yourself a little bit more miserable.
Yeah, kind of.
Right? You just
Or
need to
see
lean
that
into that
other people
frustration.
are miserable.
Say that again. Sorry.
Or to at least recognize it in other people. Like if you can't be miserable enough yourself, surely you can find someone that's miserable
Hmm.
and like you want to help them.
But like, all right, just the very first lesson in the workbook. Just how frustrating is this if you really think about it? Nothing I see means anything.
Yeah, it's not super
Like,
helpful.
dude, you could just but but you know, it has a practice of like you go through and you look at you know, the door does not mean anything. This body does not mean anything. That lamp does not mean anything. You're going through, I mean, what does this do, right? Like you're not learning, it's not teaching you anything. It's just like it's increasing your readiness, isn't it?
I don't even know. It might
It's
just
just like
frustrate you.
poking you.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly, because you're reading the course and you're like, "Oh, it's love is the only thing that's true and life is eternal and uh you know, all of this really great sounding stuff, but it's like you're not experiencing that right now."
Yeah.
And you can sort of like you can kind of go through this process where you convince yourself where if you're just looking at thoughts about that and fixated on that that like it's sort of you have this make believe world where your thoughts are taking the place of the real thing, right? And if like if your actual physical circumstances aren't that bad, you can probably get away with this for a while. And I think that that's a pretty common thing in the course. But like if you really in earnest like look at these workbook lessons and put your energy in that, it's gonna make you move.
I don't know. I might have shut that book if the first thing was your thoughts don't mean anything. Because that's like, especially if you've read any Buddhist material before, so you know what they're getting at. But if you don't know what they're getting at, you're just like, at the worst, it's insulting. At best, it's like, what are they talking about? So you're just going to move on and try to make a different puzzle piece fit instead,
Mm-hmm.
because that's not your experience at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a really interesting point, and this I hopefully this will be useful to people listening to this because I mean I do see exactly what you said. People come on and make ask questions or make comments along these lines all the time. Like I just learned about Course in Miracles. I started doing the workbook lessons, and they're like, "Please help. What the fuck are they talking about?" But part of it is you only do one every day, so you're not like it's not like stay on lesson one until you get it, because then you'd just be there forever
Yeah.
until you wake up. But
We could help that bridge too. Like we can say, for
yeah.
instance, your thoughts don't mean anything. We can just change that pointer. We know what it's trying to say. So we could say something like your thoughts have no inherent meaning, which is a fucking different thing to say. It might be
Hmm.
more helpful than your thoughts don't mean anything.
Yeah. Well, let's see. So lesson two is um, I have given everything I see all the meaning that it has for me.
Yeah, way better.
So the first one is just like antagonizing you, right? It's just like
Pretty much,
step
yeah.
one, step one, you have no idea what's going on. Step two, let's see, and then it sort of changes. So lesson five, it shifts just a little bit. And this is such a good one. This is another one like people could just do this lesson every day. I am never upset for the reason I think.
Good for somebody on
Yeah.
the level of revelation, like trying to wake up good. But I
Yeah.
mean, after that, what if you see the cause of the upset? And maybe you recognize that it's not your upset, it's just upset. But still, like it would be confusing to say, to like continually reject what your particular reality is at the time.
Hmm. Well, so part of what I see this is doing is like weakening or chipping away like your belief structure that you're coming into this with, because um and this is also discussed, I believe, in chapter 1, although it might have been chapter 2, but anyway, basically that the course is really about unlearning and like basically retracing your steps. So like all of these, you've basically, our situation now as beings that are confused about who we are, we've slowly made all these errors in our perception, and then created beliefs based on those errors. Um, and they're all, I would say, they're all unique. For each one of us, we have our unique set of errors that we made, and those have to be undone one by one. And so that's part of what I see this as doing, is like telling you. And by the way, I do think part of the way this whole thing works is like, just the course has like some weight, has a lot of weight for people that believe in space and time, right? Because it's like Jesus wrote it, and um usually people come across it under some like you could say like auspicious circumstances, right? Like somebody like gives them a copy of it, and it sits on their bookshelf for 10 years, and then all one day they decide to look at it. Like, it's always, there's always a story going along with how people found Course in Miracles. So it's like people have motivation to push through the difficult lessons, because there's a sense, there's just a sense of like something is here, right? It feels like it's like a magic book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like that's what spiritual texts are supposed to do though. It's supposed to meet you at your level and to start to take you above that somehow. It might have to like jostle you and wiggle you around first, but eventually you start moving, quote, upwards.
Hmm.
You start getting lighter and less rigid about ideas.
And that's also something um, that you have to go through that process to be ready to wake up. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
you have
it's
to get
you're
jostled.
yeah. Because anything that you're holding on to that tightly is going to keep you from being able to wake up. Either that.
Also, people don't realize
Go
they're
ahead.
holding on to something. Like that's why
Mm-hmm.
they have to get uncomfortable first.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a sugar glider or something, like chilling on a tree.
Mm-hmm.
In order to get them to move, like they need a reason to move. So the tree's got to move, or like something needs to attack them on the tree. Like something has to change such that that creature isn't so comfortable anymore. They start looking for like ways or directions to move.
Mm-hmm. So
And
like
we know that
for us,
it's, go ahead.
so for us as for us practicing tantric yoga and tantric vipassana, we learn um that basically anything that feels even remotely bad, like that's immediately a sign. That's what we're looking for all the time, is any kind of like something that's just straight up feels bad or unnatural or uncomfortable or restricted, and you just become more and more on the lookout, because that's always a sign for what needs to be healed. And that's like the vigilance. Or in the term, in course terms, it's like if something feels wrong in any way, that's something that needs to be forgiven. That's like you holding judgment over something. And but people can work on that. People can use that same principle earlier in the path, can't they?
It's feeling wrongness.
And like investigating that,
Oh yeah.
like using that as a sign of what they need to look at.
I would say if you have any propensity to search for wisdom in general, you already have it. Like you're already, because that's the thing that you want extinguished eventually, is that need to look, or the need to search, or the need to satisfy. Like it's all coming from the same place. But if it goes unaddressed long enough, it actually becomes real physical problems, and then you're in a cycle of like reacting negatively to actual problems that you've created. Whereas if you look directly at that motivation for seeking, you can just cut all that off ahead of time. Or like the thing we just read, like you save yourself possibly lifetimes of seeking.
Hmm. Let's go back to chapter 1. Let's see what else we can. Actually, what else do you have highlighted in there?
All my next ones are in section 3.
Okay,
So
give me
atonement
one.
and miracles.
Tell us what like what paragraph.
Okay, paragraph 1. I am
Hmm.
in charge of the process of atonement, which I undertook to begin, I being Jesus. When you offer a miracle to any of my brothers, you do it to yourself and me. The reason you come before me is that I do not need miracles for my own atonement, but I stand at the end in case you fail temporarily. My part in the atonement is the canceling out of all errors that you could not otherwise correct. When you have been restored to the recognition of your original state, man, that's big resonation language for us.
Hmm.
You naturally become part of the atonement yourself. As you share my unwillingness to accept error in yourself and others, you must join the great crusade to correct it. Listen to my voice, learn to undo error, and act to correct it. The power to work miracles belongs to you. I will
Wait, let me
provide the
pause you.
opportunity to do them. Pause here.
Sorry, I'm gonna pause you because that's so good.
Which
I
sentence?
don't want to. That whole. I mean, well, we were just talking about. I think we were recording this. We were talking about Guru Yoga on the recording. How to do
Mm-hmm.
Guru Yoga with Jesus. Geez, I mean, that's it right there, right? Um,
The reason you come
my
before
part in
me.
the atonement. My part in the atonement is the canceling out of all errors that you could not otherwise correct. So, um, or in addition, ones that you don't, maybe you could correct, but he can help you do it faster.
Yeah, we see this
uh,
as go do guru yoga with Jesus. But I wouldn't think anyone that does, like, if you've never done guru yoga before, that's not going to jump out. That's just going to be like, I should just worship more or harder or differently.
mhm. So let's make that connection here for people then, because like this actually is a really practical section if you read it this way. Don't you think? And I mean, this is what we were just literally just talking about. As you share my unwillingness to accept error in yourself and others, you must join the great crusade to correct it. Listen to my voice, learn to undo error, and act to correct it. Now, he also says earlier, you learn the meaning of miracles by performing them. So you get better at it by doing it. And that's, so here, learning to undo error and acting to correct it. So how I would summarize what Jesus is saying here is like basically he will come into your mind which means listening to his voice, and he'll show you in your mind how to correct your errors. And basically, by doing that with him, like holding, Jesus will hold your hand and show you and do it with you. And in doing that process, you're learning how to do it yourself. And that's the whole thing. So that's, I mean, restoring the recognition of your original state, for one, and naturally becoming a part of the atonement. I mean, this is the whole path and basically the whole method, Guru Yoga, just in this paragraph.
Yeah. Yeah, he says it pretty clearly. Like the reason you come before me. So you are coming before him. You're inviting him, or at least approaching him in your mind. And we call that yoga because there is union where we're uniting with his mind in that instant for those corrections to happen. The power to work miracles belongs to you. I have a little grievance with that because it's
Mm-hmm.
noted elsewhere in the course that we don't actually perform miracles. There's something that like they happen automatically. And moreover, Jesus does them through the sonship. It's not something an individual does. I will provide the opportunities to do them, but you must be ready and willing. Word. The ability is the potential, the achievement is its expression, and the atonement, which is the natural profession of the children of God, is the purpose. It kind of it went askew towards the end of the paragraph to me. But I do get it. Like that's you're supposed to connect with the guru. That's why I even wrote this down. Like it's obviously a preparation for
Mm-hmm.
guru or a guru relationship.
You, that makes me think. Um, my approach to this whole book has basically been that all of it is basically directly the words of Jesus. Um, but I wonder, just because, so if you read about the process or hear about like basically what happened with Helen, it's like, I can't, I'm not going to try to like explain it because you can go and hear for yourself like what she was doing, but it wasn't necessarily like a word for word thing. Like there were parts where she had dictated something and then went back and was like, oh wait, that wasn't how it should have been worded. So I do wonder if some of the stuff is actually just like lost in translation a little bit.
Yeah, just got twisted through the medium, for lack of a better way to say it.
But there's, that's interesting because I'd never really, for me, like the parts that, there are parts that are undeniably like have the transmission in them. Like you just read the sentence and you feel the transmission, and there's lines that don't quite make sense. That's probably like a good indication, but that's not really something that a beginner should try to mess with, I would think.
No, I agree. There's enough material to where something else can take the place of that question mark, at least for a while. And like with more wisdom, you can return to it.
Trevor, would you talk about do you think that anybody, because I think the answer is yes, but I want to know what you have to think about. Can anybody who picks up the Course in Miracles learn how to do Guru Yoga in a beneficial way, regardless of where they're at in the path
Guru yoga? Totally.
with Jesus?
Yeah. I would
Yeah.
have
How would
reservations
you?
about
Yeah.
saying that anyone could awaken from it, but certainly
Yeah.
anyone could do guru yoga with it.
Mm-hmm. Can we bring that down to earth for people? Like, what's an easy way to do that, and how does it help?
I would say an easy way to do that is, well, we read Gun Popo on this channel also, and something he mentions a lot is approaching the image or having reverence for the image of the guru. And that's what I would do in this case. So have just like an image of Jesus that like resonates with you, that makes you feel like you have some sort of connection or just feels significant, and then
Mm-hmm.
invite more of that connection or invite more of that significance, and then approach the text.
Mm.
And there, by approaching the text in that way with that feeling, you will find more sections of text that reinforce that feeling, that reinforce
Mm.
your feeling of familiarity, and your openness will grow faster, I think. Like
Mm.
your openness to receiving ideas outside of your own. That is what I would do as a practical sense. And also, whenever I
Mm-hmm.
encounter things I don't understand, I would literally just offer my confusion up. Like, this is something I'm not getting
Mm-hmm.
right now. I'll just leave it. I'll leave it for clarity later and just move on.
So one of the things I find myself doing with Guru Yoga is basically I just think about Jesus, for example, and I just connect with my own feeling that I know Jesus has something that I want. There's something about him that I want for myself that I don't know how to get for myself. And it's like, because if I knew how to get it, I would already have it. But I don't know. I want to know, and you have it. So I'm like approaching the master. Dear Jesus, I want
Yeah,
what
dude.
you have. I don't want anything else. Please help.
That's better than what I said. That's what I approached Baba with. Like, there's something he has that
I
I
mean,
want,
that's,
and this is how to get it. I'm meeting him immediately.
yeah. And, and, I mean, I think that all authentic relationships with teachers work in the same way. Like, if it's not an egoistic type of connection, but it's like you recognize the teacher as having something that you also want. And the only way you can get it is if the teacher decides to give to show you.
Yeah, like what if you want to become a world class chess player or sculptor or martial artist or something? You have to go to somebody that not only knows what they're doing but can relate it to you, but they have to be able to demonstrate that they have that thing that you want. Also, it just makes total sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
every art or skill, almost every art or skill, is going to work like this.
Mm-hmm. And we're so lucky with the case of Jesus to have like all of this historical, and frankly, it doesn't really matter if the historical stuff we hear is true or not. It's like inspirational either way because you can think about like all the incredible ways that Jesus has helped people, and and just the, even if you haven't heard the stories, which is unlikely, like you can just, you hear the name, you hear his name, and you just think about like the power and the warmth and the love and the gentleness and all of that stuff, and it's like, man, that's so good. I
Or
wish I could have that.
what if you have the opposite of that? Like I've had for years, like since being a kid, you hear Jesus' name and you cringe or recoil, or you're just
Mm,
like you just back away from it. There's a reason for that recoil. Like there's something that's making you uncomfortable. Eventually, if you really want satisfaction, you have to uproot what brings you discomfort or what brings you like rejection or whatever. Like that's certainly a sign. It's a sign of the power of, I would say, is Jesus as a master, and you could attribute that to any of them. Like if you have recoil from any particular like teaching itself, that's something to look at for sure. Like what is exactly being triggered? Although we're not really conditioned for that. We're usually like, no, you should go with your gut, and whenever stuff feels bad, you should just run from it immediately and go to a feel good place, which is
Yep.
great temporarily.
Yeah, that well, that's like a cultural conditioning that is I don't know, I would say it's questionable in its usefulness. Cuz taken to the extreme, it's like I mean, that just has you looking for safety in the world, looking for a safe space in the world which doesn't exist. You're just going to end up putting yourself into a tighter and tighter hole, right? A tighter place, looking for safety and avoiding everything that doesn't feel safe, which is you're never going to find it. You're just going to end up in a little black hole with yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's what they say about the
And
left
with
hand path, right? Like you just keep immersing yourself in the pleasures until eventually the emptiness is revealed to you.
mm,
So those people come back. They come back to non-duality also. It just takes way longer because
yeah, yeah.
they go the long
Well,
way to exhaust all the seeds of karma. Hopefully, not picking up more, but probably picking up more.
well, now that's also explained here, I believe, in chapter 1. Again, I'm not doing a great job of finding the quotes, but basically he he says people have a capacity to tolerate pain, but it's always limited. so so that's really and that's also I would say that's how you get to the point of readiness to where you're at the point where you're ready to wake up. It's just a matter of how much pain can you tolerate, and you have to get to that. You have to get to rock bottom, and because you're not going to stop. Oh yeah, and he says like once you reach your limit of pain, you're ready to accept that there must be a better way. But not until then. It's like not until you've exhausted that avenue. And in the case of I mean in the world we know that that's how it works. Like uh I mean there's a lot of literature out there and stuff like that about it's easier to quit addictions when you hit rock bottom. Like if you try before rock bottom, I'm not saying that people shouldn't try. You should still try, but like but getting to the point where you're ready to wake up and experience the truth via revelation, it's like you have to have reached rock bottom with everything in the world. Like there's nothing left in the world that offers any hope for you. You've already tried it.
Or you are just an incredible person and you are burning with the desire to help people and you will not take excuses anymore. You're like, I'm going to find the way to do it. But that's a rare person indeed.
Yeah. But even then, I mean, uh, I'm not, I'm not the person you just described, but I was looking for um, ways to help people. Was always kind of my motivation in this life, and I was trying different stuff, and I just kept learning that it didn't work. Like I was trying different ways to help people, and so you still have to like trial and error
Yeah.
and realize that those ways aren't any good.
I mean, I wasn't that person either. I was literally dissatisfied with everything. I just had like disillusionment goggles on.
Yeah. Well, there's more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. What else do we have in here? What else should we cover in chapter 1? We're really just like off the cuff today, which is totally
Maybe you are,
perfect.
but I made a list.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm derailing you then. What next?
Paragraph 2 is good too, and it's short. Heaven and earth
Okay.
shall pass away means that they will not continue to exist as separate states. My word, which is the resurrection and the life, shall not pass away, because life is eternal. You are the work of God, and his work is wholly lovable and wholly loving. This is how a man must think of himself in his heart, because this is what he is. So, looks a whole lot like Buddha nature to me, and looks a whole lot like samsara and nirvana are part of the same mind stream.
Yep. I mean, this is one of those ones I don't know. I don't have anything to add to that. I mean, you could almost. This is one of those sections like you could just say that every morning as a mantra and be good.
I also wrote 5 and 6 as being pretty good. Five's a little longer. Error cannot really threaten truth, which can always withstand it. Only the error is actually vulnerable. You are free to establish your kingdom where you see fit, but the right choice is inevitable if you remember this. Spirit is in a state of grace forever. Your reality is only spirit. Therefore, you are in a state of grace forever. Atonement undoes all errors in this respect, and thus uproots the source of fear. Whenever you experience God's reassurances as threat, it is always because you are defending misplaced or misdirected loyalty. So, loyalty towards self, obviously. When you
Yes.
project this to others, you imprison them, but only to the extent to which you reinforce errors they have already made. This makes them vulnerable to the distortions of others, since their own perception of themselves is distorted. The miracle worker can only bless them, and this undoes their distortions and frees them from prison. So, by forgiving them, I guess in this sense, is blessing them. You undo whatever your distortions are about them and you release them from that same distortion.
Mm-hmm. That's a really good. I mean,
oh, there's something I want to add to that.
That's a great paragraph. Go for it.
So this first part, error cannot really threaten truth, which can always withstand it. Only the error is actually vulnerable. That is you're going to return to the natural state eventually, because samsara and confusion is actually a fabrication of the mind. Like all of our beliefs that cause suffering are fabrications that can't withstand time, essentially. They take energy to hold. So a Buddhist sees this and says, eventually the grasping will exhaust. And that's like saying the same thing.
This also reminds me of the two-part formula, in the sense, and actually let me, I want to bring something else in, which I've been doing a little bit of studying on trauma healing recently, as you know, Trevor. And so Peter Levine talks about pendulating. So basically you find like a spot in your body that feels okay, just to summarize. And then you kind of touch base there, and then you go to the spot that feels bad. And you pendulate, so you go back and forth. And that's also exactly what we do with the two-part formula, where you pendulate between recognizing the selfless state and then looking at the self-based contractions. And this principle here, that only the error is vulnerable, is kind of exactly how that works. So when you're mixing the states in your mind, one of them gets worn down and the other is invincible. It's like the truth is like a diamond, right? Nothing can scratch it, but all the gunk that's blocking it eventually gets worn off the more you tumble it.
Yeah.
Right, and that's all you have to do is just pendulate it and mix them together. And it's also the same with the guru, with doing guru yoga, and going back to the actual meaning of that, which is uniting your mind with the guru's mind. Well, the guru's mind is invincible; it can't be scratched. But all the gunk in your mind can be scratched and removed. So, and within your mind actually is a diamond, just like the guru's mind, but it has all this crap on it. So you're like, you mix them together, and all the gunk is going to get scraped off, and you're going to be left with just the truth. And it's interesting that it's kind of uh, it mirrors like mechanical principles, right? Like you can just mix them in whatever way, just pendulate. You really don't have to worry about, like, you don't have to worry about scratching your mind,
Right.
right? You just mix it, just bring up all the errors and mix them up in there and look at them, and it just sorts itself out, because like what's naturally going to be left is the truth.
Yeah. And it takes energy to continue this misperception. Like it takes energy to distort the truth. Eventually,
Mm.
that runs out.
Hmm. Well, and that's another reason, like we were saying earlier, to if you put more of your attention on the discomfort and the feeling of like lack, assuming you're not already predisposed to look at that stuff like me and you were, um, the more attention you put on it, the more it's highlighted, and it's going to become more you're going to start to see the amount of energy that it takes to maintain it, and the more you perceive that effort, the more you're going to want to let go of it, because
Oh,
it's
yeah.
going to feel heavier and heavier and heavier.
And when you taste that relief from releasing that effort, oh my God, you instantly
Mm.
don't care about other things. Like you don't care about things that are
Yep.
not as good as that.
Yep. It's exactly like how people talk about, like, I mean, if you've been carrying around a 100-pound backpack for your whole life and you didn't realize it, and then once you take the backpack off, you're going to be like, oh my God.
I wrote one more thing from the third section. You respond to what you perceive, and as you perceive, so you shall behave. The golden
Hmm.
rule asks you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This means that the perception of both must be accurate. The golden rule is for appropriate behavior. You cannot behave appropriately unless you perceive correctly. Since you and your neighbor are equal members of one family, as you perceive both, so you will do to both. You should look out from the perception of your own holiness to the holiness of others. Well, like, so the last sentence pretty much nailed it home. But that whole paragraph is
Yep.
is seeing the innocence in others, like recognizing that what we normally perceive as evil doing is still innocent doing. It's just it's behavior coming from misperception of things. And I mean, the more insight you have into reality, that's I would say that's like the number one wisdom is that nobody really means, even when they mean it, they don't even know what they mean because they're not seeing the truth. They're not seeing reality for what it is. They see
Totally.
their mind and they see their assumptions and then they behave in accordance with that, but innocently.
Hmm. And that also is, I think, basically it's the basis for forgiveness
Yeah.
that we haven't really talked about yet, but um, that's the reason you're able to forgive, because it's not like what people think, like this person actually did something on purpose to harm me, and it succeeded in harming me. Therefore, forgiving is like this this leap of like, even though they did wrong, I'm just going to pretend like, I mean, it doesn't really make any sense
Yeah. Or you have to
if you think about it.
overcome
Like forgiveness in the world,
they need they deserve something for what they've done. It may not be for me,
yeah.
but they deserve something.
So it's almost like forgiveness in the world, like the wrong kind of forgiveness, it's almost like a debt transfer, right? Because you don't actually release the debt, you're just like taking it on for yourself
Yeah.
because you still think that something happened. But
Yeah, that's it. That there's a belief somewhere. If you aren't seeing the innocence of your brothers or sisters or sangha members or whatever, anybody, if you're not seeing their innocence, You're seeing your belief about them instead.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not even about them. It's really about yourself, but they are playing a role that allows you to project that particular belief.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you see, like, if you are determined to see their innocence, they're forgiven automatically. Just like when a baby like freaks out in public, you don't hate the baby. Well, most people don't hate the baby. You may hate the circumstance and the crying and whatever, and like wish the parents would do something different, but you're like, poor baby's having a bad time.
Mm-hmm. And that is how it feels um, when you perceive your own holiness and you just naturally look out on the holiness of others, right?
Oh, that's an excellent point too, because you can see the holiness in others, but if you don't see it in yourself, you're going to be making all the same mistakes. It'll just be in your own little miserable world. And conversely, if you only see your own holiness, you're going to act like a tyrant towards everyone else or act like a judge or something like that. Whereas if you put
But then
yourself
you're
on
not
equal
really
footing,
but then you're not really seeing your holiness. You just are believing that yourself is special.
yeah,
It's not real holiness. It's exaltedness, right? It's like I am exalted.
yeah. And the key to noticing that would be like it takes effort to feel exalted.
Mm.
I think that's all I had written for this section. There were other good ones, but they didn't jump out at me like those particular paragraphs did.
You know, reading this, I feel like somebody could just study chapter 1 in the Course in Miracles and just that's it. You'd be good. Just stick with chapter 1. It makes me think of I think I've mentioned this before, but it's sort of the whole book has like a fractal pattern. Like the first paragraph in each chapter is always like kind of a summary, and then it elaborates, and then it returns to the theme. And in chapter 1 itself kind of serves as that. It's like a summary, and it covers so many. I mean, a number of these paragraphs that we've read are like in themselves basically a summary of the entire path.
Yeah.
But we will keep going anyway, because what else are you going to do? What did you what do you have highlighted from section 4? I had highlighted some stuff too, but I like what you have going on. So we had a disconnect there, but we're going to wrap this video up, and thanks everyone for joining us today. We will catch you in the next video. Bye now.